The class. Fabulous. Great. Well, hello. Welcome everybody to this information session about the Jerome Fellowship at Playwright Center. My name is Julia Brown. I'm the Artistic Programs Manager here, and I am joined by...
Hello, everyone. My name is Lynde Rosario. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Director of Fellowship Programs at Playwright Center.
Fabulous. A little bit of overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about the intent of the program, kind of how it's designed, who it's designed for, eligibility. Then I am going to share my screen and take us through what the application looks like step by step, so you can kind of get a preview of that. Along the way, we'll give some tips and tricks, some advice, things like that. And then we will open up for any questions that come up. Feel free to raise your hand or drop things into the chat as we go. Or if you'd prefer, you can kind of save your questions to the end. We are recording this session, so it is totally up to you if you want to be an on-camera or an off-camera person. We'll all end up little tiny boxes on the side anyway when I'm screen sharing. And then this video will be available on the Jerome Fellowships page on the Playwright Center website if you ever need to come back and refer back to it. Yeah, Lynde, anything else to intro to that we need to go over before we get started?
No, as Julia said, if you have questions along the way, you can put them in the chat, but we'll save some time at the end for questions as well.
Fabulous. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen to show you where you can find this information. This is the Playwright Center's main webpage, pwcenter.org. This is where you can find kind of everything about what's going on at Playwright Center. There's a little note at the top. I know some of you are members. If you have not yet migrated your membership over to the new website, quick little plug to do that. It's a very fancy and shiny new website, and we want you all to be able to take advantage of it. But if I'm saying I want to apply for the Jerome Fellowship, this is where I will look. Here, this Programs tab, you'll see there's a couple of places to click. You can click All Programs, you can click Fellowships. So if we click on this, it's going to take us to a page with all of our different fellowship programs. I recommend, if you're interested in applying for the Jerome Fellowship, that you also take a look at some of the other programs, because you may be eligible for more than one, and you're welcome to apply for as many programs as you are eligible for in a given year. So if you're eligible for Jerome, you may also be eligible for Many Voices Fellowship. You may also be eligible for the Court Writer Program. So just a little plug to take a look around. But here I'm going to click on the Jerome Fellowships page, a lovely photo of Tylee Scheider. And you'll see here is kind of an overview of, we begin with an overview of the program. So Lynde, do you want to talk a little bit about kind of the intent of the program, where it comes from, and things like that?
Absolutely. This particular program is in partnership with the Jerome Foundation and is intended for early career writers. You will see in this description how we define early career. And also all of the new updates to this program, particularly the 2-year cycle. So this Jerome Fellowship application is for 2025 to 2027. And it designates you as a part-time employee of the Playwright Center, which means you are eligible for our employee benefits such as health insurance. And you are paid bi-weekly your $25,000 stipend. And of course, each of these are individually tailored, but something that remains consistent is that each fellow will satisfy 15 hours of work activities during each year of the fellowship. And some of these activities are detailed in this description, but again, because of the individualized nature of this program, those can be adjusted based on other people's schedules, but also your particular interests and where you want to put your energy.
Awesome. Thank you. And that if you have applied for this program in the past, you'll notice that that is a change and kind of a new thing. Basically, because fellows are classified as part-time employees, there has to be a little bit of employment that the IRS recognizes as employment, and that the benefits corporations and things like that. So that's one of the reasons that that is added, 15 hours over the course of a year. Additionally, all fellows will have $3,000 of development funds. That is often used for a workshop. That's kind of the most common use of it, one or multiple small workshops with actors, directors, maybe a dramaturg, maybe design consultants. It can also be used for things like extended dramaturgy consultants or research materials, things like that. So just a note that that's kind of another benefit, and that becomes kind of the centerpiece of each year. The fellows will have those development funds each year. So 3,000 for the first year and 3,000 for the second year as well. It's also a program that has a lot of craft and career development support. Lynde is a brilliant dramaturg and checks in on a regular basis with the fellows to help develop their pieces. It's really a process-based program. So there are some programs that are out there that are saying, hey, you've written a bunch of work, we're here to just get it out and send it to producers and get you an agent and things like that. This program is much more focused on developing your craft and really having the resources to sort of expand your body of work, dig in where you feel like you need to dig in, and existing in cohort and community in the Twin Cities and with the other fellows. To be a Jerome Fellow, if you are offered the fellowship and you accept, then you would move here to the Twin Cities, anywhere around Minneapolis or St. Paul, and you will be there for the 2 years. And if you want to stay after, we would love that as well. But you are committed to 2 years in the Twin Cities. Playwright Center does not own housing, but we are available to help when it comes to finding housing and finding the resources that you need in order to move here. So that's kind of the general overview of what the program looks like. Let's talk a little bit about eligibility. So first thing is we need to be able to pay you, which means you'll need to have the legal right to work and be paid in the United States. You do not need to be a citizen, but we need to be able to pay you the stipend and salary that you have earned. Additionally, this is for an early career playwright, and we're defining that as a writer that has had no more than 2 different plays fully produced by a professional theater. Now, what do we mean by that? It does not have to be an equity theater, but if you had a play that was produced by a theater, it ran for at least 3 performances in front of an audience, and everyone involved was paid. That includes yourself, director, design team, tech, actors, everybody involved was paid, then that is a professional production. Doesn't really matter how big the house was or where it took place, as long as those criteria are satisfied, that counts as a professional production. If people were paid in a bus pass or a $10 parking validation or something like that, we do not consider that professional. We consider if people were paid a reasonable stipend, hourly rate, contract fee, whatever that is. If you have questions about what counts and if you are eligible, reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to take a look at a specific situation and let you know. If your production, pardon me, opens after the application deadline of November 21st, then it does not count for this eligibility. And likewise, if it's a co-written or ensemble created, devised piece that you were one member of, but it was not your own script that you wrote on your own, that also does not count for this eligibility. So I hope that makes sense in terms of the sort of early career designation. You'll also see here, because we did redesign this program a couple of years ago, there are folks who have done a different version of the Jerome Fellowship, which was a 1-year version. So if you've never received a Jerome Fellowship, you can apply as long as you satisfy the other eligibility criteria. If you have been a Jerome Fellow on a 1-year fellowship one time, then you are eligible to apply. If you received 2 1-year fellowships or 1 2-year fellowship, then you are no longer eligible to apply for this program. And we would point you to any of the other programs that you might be eligible for instead. If you are a previous Jerome Fellow, then you will need to apply with a play that is different from the one that you initially applied with and got accepted. So basically, you can't get the same fellowship again off of the same play, if that makes sense. If you're not sure what you submitted last time, just ask me. I can look it up and let you know so you can make your decision about what to apply with. Now, going down here, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there's some information about folks who have done the program before. Then if you keep looking on this page, it'll give you an outline of the application. This can be helpful as you're starting to get things together if you're not ready to go in and begin the application itself. But I will be going over that at a different moment. I'll just highlight here, the deadline is right here on the right-hand side. This is where our new video will be once we are finished recording it. And you can also see my contact information right here. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out. I highly recommend reaching out earlier rather than later so that you're not hoping that I answer my phone at 11:45 p.m. on the deadline date, because I shan't. You'll also see here this note about Slide Room, which is the application site that I'm about to show you. If you feel like you need another refresher after being on this call or after watching this video, there is a tutorial about using the Slide Room platform right here. So there's another way to kind of refresh your memory if you're not comfortable with that platform yet. But let's go to the application. So you'll see here this pop-up. I ignore pop-ups in my brain, I think, because I grew up with the internet. So sometimes I think, where's that application button? It's right here. It's always at the bottom of the page where it has popped up. So we can just click on apply. Now this takes us away from the Playwright Center website. If you are a Playwright Center member, your member login is not going to work here because this is actually, we've essentially stepped out the door. We are away from that place. We are in a completely new building. So we need to use a different login. If you have applied using the Slide Room platform before, either for Playwright Center or for any other organization, you can use the same login that you've always used. So I'm going to put in mine because I have used it before. If I did not have an account, or if I'm not sure if I have an account, I can always click sign up right here, and that's where you'll put in your information and make an account. But I'm going to click login. My name has popped up here, so that means I have successfully logged in. I'll just highlight up here at the top. If I click on my name, this drop down has a couple of useful things. All activity is where I will go to see what applications I have in process. So if I can't remember if I've started something or not, I can click there. That will include information about any Slide Room applications that you're working on, whether they're for Playwright Center or for somewhere else. There's also an account information page. I would use that if I was going to change my email address or I wanted to change my login information. That's where I would do that. And of course, you can sign out. There's also a little help button up here with a support guide. But if you need help and you're getting stuck or things like that, reach out to me and I can call their tech support, and they're very, very helpful and very useful. But now let's say we're logged in, we're happy, we don't need help, we're ready to get moving on the application. You'll see here a kind of abridged version of what we just went through on our webpage. You can feel free to look at it, but it's no different information. And you'll see a preview down here if you want to kind of take a look at what you're going to be answering and what you're going to be attaching in advance. In general, in Slide Room, blue is our active color. So if something is blue, it means you can click on it. So we will click on this Begin Application button. And it will think about taking me there. It's going to make me be calm and zen about it. There we go. So the first thing that you're going to see is the primary application form. This is pretty straightforward in terms of um, information that we're gathering so that we can get in touch with you if need be. I'm going to put down Playwright Center's information. There is no residency requirement for eligibility. You will need to move to Minnesota if you are selected, but you don't need to be based in Minnesota in order to apply. And so we just use this information if we need to get in touch with you, and so that we kind of have that on file. Pronouns, this is optional. We will be talking about you and your work. The evaluators, the panelists, there are reasons and times to refer to you. So we want to be sure we're doing that in an accurate and respectful way. But if you would prefer not to share, then you absolutely do not need to. The title of the submitted play. This is really useful because sometimes folks will start their application and say, I'm going to submit Troilus and Cressida. And then by the time they get to the application, they're like, you know what? I'm really getting more Titus Andronicus vibes from this application. I'm going to submit that instead. In which case, I will take a look and see if there's a discrepancy, and I'll be in touch and say, hey, you said you were submitting this. This is what you attached. Can we confirm that this is actually the submission that you want to send in? So that's the reason that we're asking for the title right here. And then we ask, how did you hear about the program? And this is really useful for us in terms of our outreach. We're always trying to reach more people, new groups of people. And so if a bunch of people saw it from Instagram, or one particular university program has really been pushing it, it's really helpful for us to know as well. The next questions are about eligibility. So this outlines what we were just talking about in terms of full-length professional productions. I won't read this word for word, but you can kind of see that breakdown. And this is basically you confirming that, no, I have not had more than 2 works produced. If you say yes, SlideRoom won't kick you out of the process, but if you are not eligible for this program, it's not a good use of your time to apply for it, because I will be checking the eligibility. If you're not eligible, unfortunately, we won't be able to move your application forward. And then you've just wasted some time. So it happens every year that some folks, try to apply anyway. But unfortunately, we're not able to move forward if you don't fit the eligibility requirements. Then we have this question about, are you eligible to apply? Seems a little redundant, but this has some slightly different information, and we just want to confirm that you have read these guidelines and that they do apply to you. And then we say, did you certify that this is true, correct, and it's your own work? Yes, that is. And I can hit save here. If I got to this point and, oh my gosh, I have to run out and go to dinner, I need to save and leave, there's a save and exit button up here. So now the next time I log in, I'll be able to pick up right where I left off. In order to move on, you can either click this blue next button or this continue to the next step button. They both take you to the same place. The next page is a second form. This is a demographic information form. So demographic surveys are an imperfect tool, but they are a tool that help us understand who we're reaching in our outreach efforts, and also who is involved on all sides of the application and selection process. Applicants fill this out, evaluators fill it out, panelists fill it out, so that we can kind of track who is involved in the process, and it helps us kind of understand how power dynamics play into the process, and making sure that we are reaching folks who are interested in the program, regardless of where they come from, their background, other identity markers, and things like that. The important thing to know about this form is that it is only visible to Lynde, myself, and our producing artistic director, Nicole. That's important because that means that none of the information that you choose to share on this form is in any way connected to your application, and it does not play into the selection process or the evaluation process at all. And so I tell you that on the one hand, so that you can feel free to answer the questions however you feel you want to answer them, whether that is choosing multiple selections, writing in information, declining to answer any particular question, all of that is fine. I also highlight that because if there's some information in this survey that you feel is important for evaluators to know about you will need to put that into your application elsewhere. So if I were to say, like, it's really important to me that the evaluators know that I'm 34, then I can fill out the survey where I'll get to include my age. But if I really want the evaluators to know that, I will need to put in my artist statement or in my resume, I'm a 34-year-old playwright, and that informs my work in such and such a way. I just picked that as a random example, but just so that you know who is viewing what parts of your application. The initial application form and everything after this point are visible to the evaluators. So the first thing that we have here, again, I won't read this entire paragraph, but this is just a little summary of why we gather the information, what we do with it, why it's important to our work. This is also something that is requested by our funders, including the Jerome Foundation, which is where this fellowship gets its funding from. And so some of this is information that we have chosen how we're going to phrase the questions, but it's also information that the foundation requires that we gather. So a little bit more context on that. If you have further questions about this process, you can feel free to contact our Director of Advancement, Christopher Bynum. His information is right here, and he kind of leads the data gathering process here at Playwright Center. So I'm going to click that I've read the explanation and move on to the next questions. The first talks about racial group, and you'll see in the majority of these questions, these are check boxes. So you can check as many or as few as you would like. You are also always welcome to click decline to answer if you do not want to provide any of this information. Or if you click write in, a little box will pop up so you can write your own answer if one of the kind of pre-filled ones doesn't make sense for you. We also ask if there's anything else you want to share with us regarding this information. Again, you'll see on every question, it says the information is confidential, just as a reminder that only Lynde and I are looking at this. Next, we ask about gender terms, if any of them apply to you. So I'm going to pick the ones that apply to me. Again, questions about sexual orientation, as many as apply to you that you would like to share, or you can choose to not share. You will need to click an answer for all of the questions, but decline is an absolutely fine answer. Next, we ask about if your experience of being neurodivergent or having a disability, if that applies to you. Again, any question or any selection that makes sense for you. We also have a little definition in case neurodivergent is a word you haven't encountered yet. This question asks if you'd like to expand on your experience here, and this is a section that is useful for us as we are every year reevaluating our program and our process to try and make it as accessible for as many people as possible. So if there are folks who are sharing information about their experience with a disability or neurodivergence, that there are ways that we can make this process work more smoothly for someone or be more accessible for someone, we will absolutely want to do that. So having this information is really useful for us as we continue to develop. This next question is about English language proficiency, and this is about languages that you are fluent in or that you use primarily. I only speak English fluently, so I will choose monolingual English. I speak a little bit of other languages, but because they're not my primary language, I don't consider myself to be fully bilingual or multilingual. Then we ask about non-English languages that you use as a primary language. And the reason we ask for this is if a bunch of people we see are saying, you know, my primary language that I work in is Spanish or is Arabic or is Japanese, then, you know, we might in the future when we have resources and capacity to provide information in a bilingual way or, you know, kind of again, try and make things as accessible as possible. It's important to note that this process, the application and selection process, does take place in English. We cannot guarantee that anyone on staff or that anyone who is an evaluator or panelist has fluency in any language other than English. So we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get into the application, but that's just a note here. We want to acknowledge that, and that's one of the reasons we're asking about other languages that you might want to share that you use in a primary way. Next, we ask about age. That's pretty self-explanatory. Education level, formal education that you have experienced, and you can click kind of the most that you've had in any given selection here. Household income, estimated annual income before taxes. Again, we're kind of looking at who we're reaching and things like that. And then finally, the last question is if you have any feedback for us based on this survey. And this is really useful. You absolutely don't need to if you don't have any feedback that you want to share. But we are constantly kind of reevaluating this feedback form, how we ask the questions, what kind of responses we provide, things like that. So if you have thoughts, we would love to hear them. So now we're done with all of the forms for this process. So we will click next. And this gets us to attachments. So the attachments are, I call them the meat and potatoes of the application. This is the main thing that you will be evaluated on. You'll see here at the top, there's a little note that tells you exactly how each of the application pieces will be weighted in the scoring. So not every single piece has the same score impact. So you'll see your artist statement and goals, which is one document, is about 25% of your score. The script is 50, and the evaluator's opinion of your suitability and commitment to this program is weighted 25%. And they base that on basically your whole application packet. Do they think that this is a great fit of a program for you? There's also this note here that, we do conduct this process in English. And I want to highlight that because, a lot of people write in multiple languages. If you have text in your play or your artist statement or your resume that's not in English, it is totally up to you if you want to provide a translation or not. Just know that if you don't provide a translation, we can't guarantee that the person reading your materials will be able to read that section. So sometimes people like to add a note saying, this is untranslated on purpose, or this is the gist of what's going on in this monologue that's in a different language. You absolutely do not need to, but just so that you know kind of what we can guarantee about people who are reading your work. So the first thing we look at here is your playwriting resume. All of these documents, we are asking for a PDF. If making a PDF is something that you haven't done before or are worried about, you can feel free to message me and I can help talk you through it. In the past, we've been able to attach Microsoft Word documents, and Slideroom is not enjoying Word these days. So we're going to keep it to PDF because then I can guarantee that we'll actually get it. Thanks, Benedetto. Thanks for joining us. You'll see here, there's another kind of rundown of the professional production question. Your resume is what I base my sort of eligibility analysis on. And so I will be looking and seeing, oh, this person does look eligible, or hey, I have a question about these productions. We ask to make that process easier for me and to make sure that I am able to give you clear answers, that you indicate on your resume which productions, if any of them, were professional. So if you highlight them, put an asterisk, bold, put a footnote, whatever that looks like, hey, these were my professional productions, then that just makes the process more smooth. And then I will be able to tell you accurately if you are eligible or not. We don't really care about the format. As long as we can read it, that's what matters. So it doesn't have to be X font size, X margins, or what the sections look like, things like that. As long as it's legible, that sounds great. So I'm going to choose a file, and then it will open my kind of desktop. and I will pick a PDF and attach that. We're going to pretend this is a resume document, but you'll see it's processing, and then it'll give me a little preview of my document here. You can also see this little trash can. If I upload my resume and I realize like, oh crap, that's the wrong version or it's the wrong document, all I have to do is click this little trash can, it'll delete it, and I can upload something else. The next document that we have is our artistic and goals statement. I'm going to pause for a question. Nicolaj, do you consider self-producing as professional productions? If everyone involved was paid, then yes. If you paid your own money to do this and you didn't collect any kind of payment for your work as a playwright, then no. So that's kind of where the line is drawn. If you produced it yourself, but you got a decent cut of the box office or whatever that means, and everybody involved was paid reasonably, then that's professional. If not, then no. If we have productions that would not be considered professional, would you like us to mark that they are not? You don't need to mark this is not professional, this is not professional. Just mark the ones that are. Unless that's the way you want to set up your resume. If it's important in your resume to give more details about each of the pieces, you absolutely can. You can make your resume as detailed or as general as you would like. But in terms of what I look at for eligibility, I'm not counting non-professional productions because there's no limit on that. Thank you for those great questions. The next thing we're going to talk about is the artistic statement and goals. So this is a document that is 1 page in length, and it sort of does 2 things. It tells us about your goals for the fellowship. What about your craft do you want to develop? What are your artistic goals for yourself, your work, your career, and how can this program help get you to those goals? And we also want to learn about your vision as a theater maker. Why do you make the work that you do? How do you articulate the work that you make? And we will also be looking at how do your statement and your submitted play support one another. For example, if I in my statement say, it's really important to me to dig into the history of queer people in Minnesota. That's what's like driving me. I'm really interested in research and archival based work. And then I submit a script that is a space opera set on Mars, and it's, hilarious and a musical and amazing. Super great. But the evaluators are going to look at that script and that artistic statement and wonder, okay, I don't see how she's doing what she says she's setting out to do in this script. So as you're thinking about your overall application package, I definitely recommend kind of taking a look at how am I presenting myself and how am I teeing up my script? And then what are the evaluators going to see in the play that connect to my mission and my vision? Lynde, would you like to talk a little bit about advice for artist statements?
Sure, absolutely. I think it's really important to recognize that this is only 1 page. So being concise and specific about you as an artist, specifically your aesthetic, as Julia said, all of your goals, it is sometimes a little sad for us to see that people dedicate their artist statements to convincing us that playwriting is important or that theater should continue. Please know we understand that, and we know all of our panelists are also working artists, and so it is important not to take the space of what could be a way to identify yourself and talk about you and your art with something that we already all know and love as well. This is also not a space to be to exhibit your greatest humility. Humble doesn't always help you. I think it's important to start identifying not just your goals, but who you are as an artist. And as Julia said, this is all going to be a complete narrative, the entire application. And so making sure that the things that you highlight in your artist statement are also reflected, not just in your script sample, in your full-length play, but also in the letters of recommendation. that you will seek out to make sure that you really do. When we start talking about that, I'll go into a little more detail on that, but also to say that, this is a space to really talk about why a Minnesota-based residency is right for you. If you come to the artist statement talking about, I can't wait to move to California to be a TV writer, perhaps a Minnesota-based Playwrights Center program is not the next step. But if it is, we really want to hear from you specifically why you believe that. And again, the 25% of suitability is not an insignificant amount to wait. So please be sure to take that time to really look at the program's offerings and talk about how they apply to you and the future of yourself as a playwright. I think we might have another question in the
Yeah,
chat.
I see. Tracy, we will get to your question in just 1 minute when we talk about the scripts. But Heidi has a great question. There are a lot of sort of questions in this paragraph under the artistic statement. I would think about them more as prompts than as I must go down and answer each of these questions. This is what we would like to learn about you through the course of the artist statement, but you don't need to like, here's the question, here's my answer, if that makes sense. So what we really want, ideally, what is going to happen when an evaluator reads your artist statement, they're going to go, oh my gosh, I really understand where this person is coming from, why they make the work that they work, how it affects them and is informed by them as a person, why this medium is important to them. I now understand why they're not a novelist, or they're not a screenwriter, or they're not a chef, and they are using the art form of theater as their vehicle for doing what they want to do. I'm excited about all of that. I understand why they're interested in this program specifically. They're not just submitting the same application to 81 different opportunities this year. They know what they're getting themselves into. I'm excited about the idea of them being in cohort with other writers. I'm excited to see them in Minneapolis or to hear about what they learn in the Twin Cities. And I'm super, super pumped to read this play. So that's kind of what you want people to walk away from your statement feeling, or something, as close to that as possible. A little bit of advice from some folks who have taught some great classes about artist statements are that it can be helpful when you're creating an artist statement to share it with at least 2 different people, one being someone who really knows your work well, whether that's like an educator, a colleague, a director you've worked with, but who maybe isn't like your oldest childhood friend who knows you personally super well. Give it to that person, and then give it to somebody who knows you as a person really well, but maybe hasn't read all of your plays or hasn't been in process with you as a playwright. And ask what those 2 people see in your artist statement. And ideally, both of them will recognize you in it, and both of them will learn something about you in it, because you're trying to give an idea of here's who I am as a person and how I show up in the room. And also, here is how my work shows up in the room. And I know we've said a lot of different things. There's a lot of stuff to fit into this artist statement, but there are ways to do that in kind of a cohesive and, I hate to say efficient, but an efficient kind of way that in a page we can get a good sense of why you, why theater, why Jerome, why Minneapolis, basically. So I will choose a file to connect to. I'm going to choose this file and pretend it's my artist statement. And next we will go to the full-length play script. And Tracy had a great question about the script. Are we writing a new script during the fellowship or working on the script that we're submitting? That's a great question. In this application, the Jerome Fellowship is for a playwright, not a play. So you're not submitting a proposal for this is specifically the work that I'm, committing to developing. You're not submitting a play for a best play award. This script is really your writing sample. So we recommend that it is something that you consider to be a really strong example of your writing. You feel proud of it. It feels, if not the final production ready draft. I would say that a very first draft that feels very shaky and that you're not super confident in, I would not recommend submitting that piece. And that it connects to what you've set up in your artist statement. When you become a fellow, we will have many conversations about what you're going to do during your fellowship, what plays, 1, 2, 3, however many that you want to develop over the course of the year, how you want to do that, how you want to use your resources. All of that comes after you've been accepted. So for this program, you don't need you're not necessarily saying, here's the play, I would like resources to develop it. So I would say, don't necessarily pick, this is the play that needs the most work, because it's really just serving as a writing sample. It's absolutely fine to submit a play that you're really proud of and you feel is a good example of your work, but that you're done working on. It can even be a play that's been produced or published. That's absolutely fine. So thank you for that question. That's an excellent question. If there are specific pieces that you are raring to go and you're saying, I know exactly what I'm going to work on if I'm a fellow, you can absolutely mention that in your artist statement as it ties into your goals, why you would want to work on those plays specifically here at Playwrights Center, or how they're tying in. I'm really excited about what's going next in my craft and my mission as a playwright. And here are some plays I'm working on that really exemplify that. You might want to mention that in the artist statement if you would like, but this script doesn't need to be one of those pieces, if that makes sense. Awesome. Question from Jordan. In our artist statement, should we reference other pieces we've written as examples? You absolutely may. You absolutely can. If you want to say, this play that I wrote really shows that, my commitment to such and such a theme or such and such a topic, or as I was working on this play, I learned a lot about myself as a playwright, for example, XYZ, and I want to keep on that trajectory through the Jerome Fellowship or something like that. You can absolutely mention as many or as few of your own pieces in that as you would like. One thing I would say, and thank you, Jordan, because this tees me up for another thing that's important to say, as Lynde mentioned, artist statement is precious, precious real estate. So I do not recommend just regurgitating your resume. They will already have looked at your resume, so you don't need to spend paragraphs saying, first, I studied at this place, and then I did a reading here, and then I did a workshop in Jersey, and then I blah, 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 blah. They've already seen it, and at that point now, you've only got half a page left to really dig into your why. So, you can certainly reference other pieces that you've done, but I wouldn't just turn your artist statement into a recitation of all of your plays, if that makes sense. Lynde, any advice about picking a script?
Julie, I think you really covered it. I think it's really important to recognize that this is supposed to be a prime example of you as an artist and the type of work that you create, and also relating back to the artist statement. And so, again, if it is the most finished play you have ever done, that is totally fine, as long as it is not the one you may have received a fellowship for before, as we have said earlier. And so it is important to recognize that this is not necessarily like the earliest draft of the piece. And it might be helpful also in your artist statement, if you're going to make a reference to it, to really talk about why this piece. Really, that artist statement is the why of the entire application. So yeah, I think
That's great.
And again, the full length is important. If you have questions about if your particular piece is full length, please do contact Julia, because we can talk through what that means.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are defining full length as a piece that runs at least 45 minutes in performance. That can mean a lot of different things for page length, depending on the type of work it is. And sometimes we have considered pieces that run shorter, depending on kind of the standards of that form. It does not happen super often. So generally, if you say, oh, I only have a 10-minute play, I won't be able to accept that in place of a full-length play, partially because, we really want you to have a good shot at getting this fellowship. And we've found in the past that if one applicant has, 45 pages of work and one applicant has 10 pages of work, the second applicant really doesn't get, it's just not a great way to showcase their work. And evaluators are interested in seeing how you build a piece, what kind of structure, whether it's experimental or traditional or recognizable in some way, what kind of structure you use, how your craft develops over the course of a piece, things like that are important. I also want to highlight this note. You are welcome to apply with a musical or a play with music if you would like, but we do not have composers or musicians or music specialists in our evaluator pool. That is not something that we are particularly looking out people who specialize in music. So we are only evaluating text. So we do not ask for any demos or recordings. And in fact, we specifically tell our evaluators not to go out and seek demos, not to go looking for video of anything. If there are hyperlinks in your script, we will specifically tell people not to follow those hyperlinks. And that includes if they're links to music, links to video, links to photos. We're really focusing everything on the text. And one of the other reasons we do that is because not everyone who writes a musical has access to collaborators, recording equipment, a way to make a really professional demo. Some folks will be submitting a musical that they haven't even collaborated with a composer on yet, so there isn't music. And so we just don't want to have sort of a really professionally produced demo of really killer music that's written by someone other than the playwright to suddenly make someone get a fellowship over somebody else when it turns out the evaluators are actually not really evaluating the applicant's work, if that makes sense. That's the other reason that we don't allow co-written work for this application. It's absolutely fine if once you are a fellow, you choose to use some of your development resources to work on a co-written piece. That's totally fine. I have a collaborator. Now that I'm a fellow, I want to work with this person or these people. That's fine. But for the purposes of the application, it's an individual artist fellowship. So we need to be able to evaluate your work specifically. If you are working on a musical or a libretto or something where you collaborated with a composer or a lyricist, we ask that you are very clear in your script of what you wrote. So if you wrote the book and the lyrics and the composer wrote the music, then the evaluators know, oh, I can also evaluate the lyrics in this piece as I'm reading the book. If someone else wrote the lyrics, we ask that you're very clear about that so that the evaluators know, okay, I'm really responding to the book itself. I'm not actually responding to the lyrics of this piece. If you have questions about sort of the nuances of this and how we direct the evaluators to reflect on your work, please reach out to me. I'm happy to talk at any time. I in no way mean to discourage musical writers from applying. We've had some great people who specialize in musical theater, been fellows in the past and have worked on musicals, but I just want to be very clear about what we're able to evaluate in this process. So now I have all my attachments in. This is great. My application is almost done. I will click the next button. This takes us to references. Slide Room uses the word reference. We tend to use the word letter of recommendation. So you will need to provide 2 letters of recommendation from people who are familiar with your work. That can be a collaborator, someone who's directed your work, who's performed in your work, an educator, a fellow student. Sometimes early career writers feel like, oh my God, I have nobody who could possibly write me a letter. But I bet you do. I bet someone has read your work before, whether in an educational context, as a friend. If no one's read your work before, I highly recommend maybe finding a group of people who are at a similar stage in their careers where you read each other's work and give each other feedback or offer to support each other. I would not recommend getting a letter from a parent or a spouse. That is something that people do sometimes. It tends to be less effective, particularly if it's clear to the evaluator that that is who that person is, because it's kind of assumed that they can't be entirely objective if they have such a close relationship with you. But it is totally up to you who you want to ask. You will not have to submit the letters yourself. What you will be doing is you will click add reference here, and you will put in the person's name. You can put any of this other information that you would like, but you will enter their email address. And I always like to write a little message saying like, hi, this is the application we talked about. I highly recommend asking someone if they will write a letter for you before you put their information into this document, just so that they're prepared for it. You know that they have time to do it. And it's just a little presumptuous to just send them the request right away without talking to them first. You also want them to know a bit about what you're applying for so that they can write you the strongest letter possible. Now, as soon as I put in Emily's information here and click send request, she gets an email instantly. So if you are working on your application and you want to take some more time on your artist statement or deciding on your script or things like that, I definitely recommend starting the application and going to page 3 here and putting in your reference information earlier, so that, especially at this point, we're about a month out from the deadline, you want to give your recommenders time to write a strong letter for you. And also knowing that some people have to write a bunch of letters of recommendation at this time of the year. And you don't want to kind of be penalized for someone not coming through for you. So I would recommend going in here, putting in the information, and then hit save and exit, come back and finish the application whenever you feel ready to do that. So I'll need 2 of these recommendations. So I'll put in my second person. And I won't write a message this time just for time, but you'll know you can do that. Now, whenever I come back to my application, I can take a look at this and see, okay, this is when it was requested. When Emily fills out the recommendation, this will say that it's finished. If Emily tells me, oh, I actually have a new email address, I can click edit and sort of change that and resend. If Emily says, I really didn't get this, can you resend it to me? Just hit this button. After you submit your application, you can't go back in and edit, but you can always reach out to me and say, hey, Emily didn't get this, request for a recommendation. Can you resend it? And I can do that. If for some reason Emily cannot figure out the system at all, have her send me, Julia, the letter, and I will attach it for you. So there are workarounds. We don't want you to be penalized because your recommender is not comfortable on the internet. That is a totally fine thing. Now, letters are due at the same time as the rest of the application. So that's something important to let your recommender know. Once you put their email in, they will get an email that says, hey, here's the deadline to submit this letter. But you may want to follow up with people and remind them as well. When it comes to picking who writes your letter, I definitely recommend focusing on someone on close versus big, if that makes sense. Someone who knows your work and can speak to it really specifically and passionately, someone who understands you as an artist, who knows what you're like in process. That is going to be stronger than a sort of vague, this person seems cool, from the most famous person you've ever met. If you have a close relationship with like a big name, great. But sometimes, particularly earlier career writers will feel like the name carries the most weight. And in our experience in this process, that's not the case. Someone who no one has heard of, who is really speaking in a beautiful and compelling way about your work, about how you bring yourself into the process, about what kind of mission you're on as a theater maker, that is always far, far, far more successful than something that can't be that specific. I also recommend that you have your recommender talk about you as an artist and not just pitch one specific play. Sometimes someone will say, yeah, you should produce this play. This one play is amazing. Here's what it's about. Here's a synopsis of the play. that doesn't tend to be that strong of a letter of recommendation because you're not submitting a play for consideration for production and you are asking to be selected as a full human playwright, not just as one specific play. Lynde, do you have other advice for letters of rec?
Sure, and I also see we have a question in the chat, so I'll let Julia respond to that after I just sort of add one quick thing is that as someone who does get invited or asked to submit letters of recommendation, I think it's also important to recognize that the person you ask may not know anything about this program that you're applying to. And so it is really important to go back to your artist statement and those goals and just pick a few that you feel like are really helpful to communicate why you are a good fit and why this program is attractive to you, to the person who you are recommending. It really helps that person get very specific about why they believe they want to support this next leg of your journey in your artistic career and advancement. So be really specific when you make those initial asks to these recommenders about who you are, why you think you're the right fit for this particular program, and then be very specific about the ask for them. Let them know that they're going to get an email. Let them know that that email is going to include a due date for them so that you can really empower them to have the most successful time in creating that competitive letter of recommendation for you.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Kurt has a great question about word count. There is no minimum or maximum word count or page count or things like that. I will say that when a letter of rec gets to like 3 pages or longer, I have had some evaluators say like, that was a little long, that was a little much. So if someone is like writing you a novel, we want to respect people's time. And as with like an artist statement, it's helpful to be focused, but also we know that you don't control what other people write about you. So if someone is asking for like a general length, like 1 to 2 pages, I think is standard and has been very effective. But again, it's kind of up to that person how they want to write. Can someone who applies for the fellowship submit a letter of rec for another applicant? Yes, you absolutely may. And then we will talk a little bit about the rounds of evaluation in just 1 second. Nicolaj should just give us 1 minute on that, but great question. So our letters of recommendation are in, we're ready to go. So now we hit the next button and we're on to the submission page. So once you hit the submit button, you will not be able to go back and make any changes. If you realize before the application deadline, oh crap, I messed something up, I forgot something, I put the wrong dated draft or whatever it is, email me and I can reopen your application for you. And then you can go in, make the edit, and then you will need to submit again before the deadline. I cannot make any edits to anyone's application after the deadline. Sometimes people will ask like 3 months later, hey, I have a new draft. Can I put it in my application? No, once the deadline is passed, we do not edit any applications. So here's how the selection process works for the Jerome Fellowship. Everyone applies by November 21st because no one is late in this imaginary version of the world. Everyone has their stuff together and ready to go. So the week after the application deadline, I will be sharing the applications with our first round evaluators. We have a large pool of evaluators from around the country. They are playwrights, dramaturgs, directors, artistic directors, lit managers, educators, folks who have a lot of experience in reading and responding to new work, who are generous of spirit, who are excited about new work, who are excited about different aesthetics and different forms, and are able to respond to and get excited about all different kinds of writing. They will evaluate the applications. Everybody's application gets evaluated at least 2 times in this round. And then based on scores and comments from those people and that weighted score that we told you about earlier, that's kind of how the scoring works. Based on the initial round responses, we will narrow the pool to a semifinalist pool. In likely January, February, you will hear from me whether you have become a semifinalist or not this year. So you'll get an email from me either way. If you do become a semifinalist, then your application will go to a panel of 3 people who are going to read all of the semifinalist applications, get together and have a conversation. Over the course of that conversation, they will narrow the semifinalist pool to a finalist pool, a smaller number of people. Those people will be invited for a half-hour interview. Everyone gets individually, it's not a group thing, that would be crazy. But each individual person will be invited to chat with the panel for half an hour. We will have specific questions that we let you know about in advance that we want you to talk about. It's also a chance for the panel to ask questions that may have come up as they read the application. Hey, you said this thing in your artist statement. Could you clarify what you mean by this? Could you dig in more on that? After they have talked to all of the finalists, the panelists will discuss again and will decide on the fellows. And then we will make the offer to the folks who have been selected for the fellowship. And we will also let everyone else know that the decision has been made. If you do not get selected this year, you will get an email from me that tells you that, and that also offers you feedback. We offer feedback on all of our applications, on all of our programs. You will see in the email how to request that, the date to request that by. I recommend taking advantage of that service to help make your application stronger, not just for this program, but for anything you're applying for in the future. All of that feedback is based on what we have learned and heard from the evaluators and the panelists. Playwright Center staff is not involved in the decision-making process. So Lynde and I never give our opinion on any part of anybody's application. We only facilitate the process, bring people into the room, help them kind of have a conversation with one another, provide a rubric, things like that. So that's important to know. We're excited about all of you. We would love to work with all of you. And so it's really going to be up to our colleagues that we bring in to finally narrow down and make that decision. I think that answers your question. In terms of how many fellows are accepted? 3 fellows. So there'll be 3 fellows for the next 2 years. In terms of how many applications we get, it really varies from year to year. It tends to hover around the like 80 to 100, 80 to 110 mark, but it really does depend with the wind and the weather of how many people are applying on each given year. There are no additional requirements. If you become a semifinalist or a finalist, you don't need to write anything new. You don't need to send more materials. We will just be asking you to hold a specific time for an interview. So that's the only thing that we'll ask you for at that point. So now that I've done my whole application, I'm ready to submit. I can click here to preview if I want to do a last minute, like make sure I answered the questions the way I wanted to, make sure the documents that I want to be there are all set. Yes, these are the right references. Now I can click submit application. Yay, happy green check mark. It means that happened. If for some reason you do not see the happy green check mark or it gives you an error or something, get in touch with me and I will help you solve the problem. It usually doesn't happen, but just in case. You'll see here you have a confirmation number. You do not need this. If I need to look up your application, I can do so by your name. But if you're a person who feels more secure when you have something official looking like a confirmation number, feel free to save this. It's totally fine. You can print this confirmation page. You can also print a copy of your whole application if you are a hard copy binder person. You'll see this message with the note that I just mentioned that you'll be hearing from us by the end of January in terms of whether or not you've become a semifinalist. We also are offering, if you are not currently a member of Playwright Center, in acknowledgement of the time it takes for you to apply, we are offering you a free trial of membership. And so you'll see here, if you get in touch with Hannah, who is the director of the program, she can help you set up a free trial. I believe it's a 3-month trial. Because we think that if you're a playwright, you will find it useful, or we hope you will. Let me take a look. I know I've got a couple other questions. When are final decisions typically made? So you'll hear about whether or not you're a semifinalist in January. The final decision is usually made by the end of March. There may be some years things take longer than others, so I can't guarantee that, but that's usually what we look at by end of March for this particular program. And do selected fellows typically have MFAs? That's a great question, Nina. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They absolutely do not need to have an MFA. You don't need to have any sort of degree. You don't have to have a college degree, an associate's degree, a GED, high school diploma. None of that is necessary for this program. So some folks will have had that experience and some folks will not. For the resume, should we include plays written that have not been given workshops, readings, or performances? You absolutely can. It is up to you what information is important to you in that resume. And as Lynde said, I would recommend thinking about your entire application as one piece. It's one story. So what are you focusing on in your resume, in your statement, in your script, in your letters? How can that be a consistent story? So for some people, yeah, if I haven't had any productions and I've maybe had one workshop, then I probably do want to share information about the other plays that I've been writing. Or maybe if I wrote a novel, if I got some poems published, if I'm an educator, other things that might inform. And if in my artistic statement, I'm then saying, hey, I'm a poet. And so that informs my writing in XYZ way. I'm an educator. And so I've been writing a lot about this topic that's related to what I learned from my students. I would say in terms of non-playwriting experience on your resume, if it's not relevant to the story you're telling, I wouldn't include it. So for example, I maybe wouldn't say the years that I worked at Subway, for example. However, if my play is like a musical comedy set at a Subway and I'm using my personal experience to tell that story, it might be interesting to say, you know what, this is what inspired this play. I spent 6 years working at Subway and, now I'm writing this play about it. So it's up to you. Thank you, Brian. I would also see that play. So it's up to you kind of what you want to share, but really try and think about like, what's the through line? What's the story that you're telling about yourself? Because what we don't want to have happen is to have an evaluator say, there are some really cool elements to this person's work, but I don't quite understand what they're saying to me. And I don't understand what's driving them. And I don't understand why they want to do this program, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would also just add that I think the worst thing that a panelist can be is confused, right? Like clarity is really the key when creating a narrative about your artistic identity. So really start to get specific about that. I see a couple more questions.
Yeah, I see Tracy, the timeline for moving. Yes, if you are accepted as a fellow, you will likely hear from us by the end of March or by probably April at the latest. Then we would give you a lot of information about the program, about the Twin Cities, things like that. The fellowship begins on July 1st, 2025. And so we expect fellows to move during the summer. Sometimes people are able to be here right for July 1, which is great. Sometimes it takes a couple more weeks for them to be able to move, which we understand. But you would plan to move here in summer of 2025 and be here through at least June 30th of 2027. So, and then you are able to leave the state of Minnesota to, go on vacation, have workshops, things like that. But you can see on the main program page kind of the maximum amount of time that you're able to be out of town without affecting your residency. Heidi, question, is it permissible to work on other kinds of disciplines of writing? Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be, if you become a fellow, that'll be a conversation that you have with Lynde and myself about how to use your resources and your development funds. I would say the Playwright Center specializes in playwriting. So if you're hoping to spend 2 years working on poetry or writing music or dance, this may not be the right fit, because that's not what we specialize in. If you're working on a play that has dance elements, we can certainly help you find choreographers and movers and dancers to be involved in that development process with you or to consult with you. But something that is a non-text based, like only a dance piece, maybe isn't the right fit for here. It's not what we do best. And so, but in terms of what you do during your year, that is not your Playwright Center workshop or is not funded by your Playwright Center development funds. Absolutely. Write a novel, write a newspaper, like, absolutely. You'll be living here and having a full life as a person and as an artist. And so I would say if you work in other disciplines and you feel like it really informs your playwriting and is something that you want people to notice when they read your play, absolutely mention that in your artist statement, as it's part of the overall story of who you are and how you came to this point in your playwriting career.
I'd just love to address something that was mentioned a little earlier about the transition to moving to the Twin Cities. Now, Julia and I do a great job of sort of giving you the preliminary information about what is already here. A lot of it has been crowdsourced by people who have moved here to talk a little bit about what are their favorite spots, what feels like this was a sticky situation for them that they learned how to get out of by themselves, and what are the resources they used. But very honestly and frankly, anytime an opportunity asks you to move from your current location to a major city of anywhere in this country, there will be transition time and there will have to be an acclimation period. So please consider your comfort level in that before applying to this, because it is a major element. The residency is the major element of these programs. And so it is important to recognize that that will take some transition time. Something I do in the first few months of each of these fellowships is to create a lot of community building opportunities and cohorting that happens specifically local to the Twin Cities. There are always sort of the national visibility of these types of fellowships, but we spend a lot of time really digging into the artistic community of the Twin Cities. And so that acclimation period is supported by the activities of the fellowship. So, but again, there is a transition. There will always be a transition for you personally, moving from wherever you are currently to a brand new city, a major city of the United States. So it's important to recognize that as you go through the process of this application.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we also are able to, look at apartments for you and take pictures, provide, employment verification for landlords, things like that. We try to help make the process as smooth as possible, while also knowing that Playwright Center doesn't own a block of apartments that you move into. What are qualities of a Jerome Fellow that are most important as opposed to core writer or other programs? That's a great question. So like Lynde mentioned, the Jerome and sort of its partner program, the Many Voices Fellowship, they're two almost identical programs, are the ones that require this move, that have this residency requirement. So it's very much more of a cohort-based program than, for example, Core Writer. Core Writer is a program, it's a 3-year program that is open to writers around the country. They can live anywhere in the US. They do not move anywhere specifically, and they come out here one at a time for a workshop. And so while we try to, create some virtual community amongst core writers, and we hope, they connect with one another on their own, we aren't bringing all of the core writers together to spend a significant amount of time, if that makes sense. The Jerome and Many Voices Fellows, together with some of our local McKnight Fellows, spend a lot of time together. It's definitely also because it's focused on an early career writer, whereas Core Writer and the McKnights are focused on more mid-career established writers who kind of have a little bit more of a body of work under their belt. The Jerome is really focused on process and craft. It's definitely a way to kind of experiment with different ways of writing plays, if you would like, experiment with working with different collaborators. A lot of the fellows haven't had a lot of opportunity to work. For example, if somebody came out of an educational program And so they've only seen undergrads perform their plays. This might be the first chance that they get to actually have accurate casting in a workshop, or, really getting to maybe take a master class with a phenomenal playwright, and kind of learn from the way that they tell story and things like that. So it's more hands-on. There's more sort of requirement and expectation that these fellows will show up, and will kind of show up for each other and also attend when we have classes or meetings or writers group, things like that. Um, it's also kind of pretty self-directed in some ways too. So some years the fellows all want to, let's get together once a month and read each other's work and talk about it. Some years they say, you know what, let's get together and bake pies together, or let's like go somewhere in the Twin Cities and experience something we haven't done before. It's really kind of whatever is going to be useful to that group on a given year.
Also just say, to remind you all of the major difference that you may have noticed from previous years of this particular program, is that this is actually now a part-time job. So the interview component, the biweekly pay, the eligibility for employee benefits such as health insurance, this is really about finding a place for yourself, but also making sure that you recognize that this will have a work component attached to it, which is different than the core writer program for sure. And it also has to do with the 2-year duration, but also to note that like each of the offerings do not carry over into the second year, but are replaced. So you get the 25,000 stipend and the 3,000 development funds. If you don't use all 3,000, there's no rollover to that second year. A new set of funds comes up in that second year. And so it is important to recognize that if you are the type of person who thrives in that kind of structure, who really excels when these types of expectations are clearly laid out, and like really have that personal connection to the program and to the other members of the Playwright Center and the artistic community, then this is the right program for you. This is the one that you should be applying to, because it does build that infrastructure specifically around the fellows. So it is important to sort of have that self-awareness before venturing out and making the official move.
Yeah. And I would say, on the other hand, if your goal for the next 2 years is to be left alone in your apartment and maybe venture out once only to have your own play read, it may not be a great fit, because we want people to show up for each other's work and support each other's work, to be able to come in. We spend a lot of time, and Lynde spends a lot of time and effort bringing in members of the artistic community, both locally and nationally, to let these fellows have time with them and learn about their institutions, how they program, all kinds of things about the field. And it's just a bummer if someone is not interested in any of that ever, because it's a good resource, and it's a way to kind of spread your wings as an early career writer. I know we've gone quite long, and I apologize for that, but we've had so many wonderful questions. Thank you so much. Are there any last questions? And feel free to chat or pop on screen or on audio if you would like. Any last questions about any part of this process, the program, the application, anything like that? Hearing none, I will say, let's all have lunch. Thank you all so much for joining us, for your wonderful questions. Again, this recording will be available on the website if you need to refer to it, or if you'd like to share it with your colleagues. We also would love if, as we mentioned, our outreach initiatives, word of mouth is our strongest way of outreach. So if you have colleagues who you also think would be interested in the program, do please share the information. I will drop my email address in the chat right here. It is also all over the website. So please reach out to me at any time if you want to chat one-on-one or have specific questions. Be happy to help you out. But thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your Wednesday. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.